The time for half measures is over. We end this today.
Lord Chelmsford's words echoed across the Mullabathini plain as 15,000 British and colonial troops formed into a massive square formation. It was July 4th, 1879, exactly 5 months after the shocking defeat at Isandlwana. Across the plain, 20,000 Zulu warriors prepared for what would be their final stand. The Anglo-Zulu War had come full circle. Today, we complete our trilogy of this dramatic conflict. And if you haven't watched our detailed breakdowns of Isandlwana and Rorke's Drift, I highly recommend checking those out first. They set up everything that led to this climactic moment. Let's quickly recap how we got here. January 22nd, 1879, Isandlwana. The Zulu army achieved one of the most stunning military victories in colonial history, destroying a British column and killing over 1,300 troops. Traditional tactics and superior numbers overwhelmed modern firepower in open terrain. Same day, Rorke's Drift. Just hours later, 150 British defenders held off 4,000 Zulu warriors in an epic siege that lasted all night. Prepared positions and disciplined firepower proved that the technological advantage could prevail under the right circumstances. These two battles taught both sides crucial lessons about modern warfare. The Zulus learned that their traditional tactics could still triumph with proper execution and favorable terrain. The British learned that dispersed formations were deadly vulnerable, but that concentrated firepower from prepared positions was nearly unstoppable. At Ulundi, both sides would apply these lessons in a final, decisive confrontation that would determine the fate of the Zulu kingdom. If you want the full tactical details of those earlier battles, check out our previous videos in the series. The links are in the description. By July 1879, the Anglo-Zulu War had reached a stalemate. After Isandlwana, Lord Chelmsford had been reinforced with massive troop numbers. 2 full infantry divisions, cavalry regiments, artillery batteries, colonial volunteers, native auxiliary forces, total strength, 15,000 men. King Cetshwayo, meanwhile, faced a deteriorating situation. His capital at Ulundi was directly threatened. Food supplies were running low across Zululand. Many of his veteran regiments had suffered heavy casualties. British columns were systematically destroying Zulu kraals. But the Zulu army remained formidable. 20,000 warriors could still be assembled. They fought on home ground they knew intimately. Traditional tactics had proven effective at Isandlwana. Morale remained high. Despite recent setbacks, the stage was set for a climactic battle that would decide everything. Chelmsford needed a decisive victory to salvage his reputation after Isandlwana. Cetshwayo needed to destroy another British force to force a negotiated peace. Both commanders understood that this battle would likely end the war. July 3rd, 1879, Chelmsford's columns converged on Ulundi. The British commander had learned harsh lessons from Isandlwana. This time, there would be no divided forces, no scattered camps, no ammunition shortages. The British plan was methodical. Formation: massive infantry square, 15,000 men in a defensive rectangle. Artillery: Gatling guns and field artillery positioned at the corners. Cavalry: mounted troops ready to exploit any breakthrough supply. Ammunition wagons secured within the square intelligence. Extensive scouting to prevent surprises. This wasn't the overconfident advance of January. This was systematic, overwhelming force applied with scientific precision. King Cetshwayo faced an impossible choice. Attack. Risk his entire remaining army against prepared positions. Withdraw. Allow the British to destroy Ulundi unopposed. Negotiate. Accept defeat and likely exile. The Zulu king chose to fight. Better to die as warriors than live as slaves, he reportedly told his commanders. July 4th, 1879. Dawn. The final battle would begin. The Zulu military faced a tactical nightmare. Everything they had learned about fighting the British pointed to contradictory strategies. Lesson from Isandlwana. Traditional horns of the bull formation could overwhelm dispersed enemies through speed and numbers. Lesson from Rourke's drift. Frontal attacks against prepared positions resulted in catastrophic casualties. At Ulundi, they faced the worst possible scenario, a massive prepared position that couldn't be outflanked. The British square formation negated every Zulu tactical advantage. No flanks to exploit. The square was strong on all sides. No mobility advantage. The British weren't moving. No surprise element. The battlefield was wide open plain. No cover. The terrain offered nowhere to hide Zulu. Commander Mnyamana Kankengelele understood the tactical reality. "We cannot win this battle," he reportedly told his war council. But Zulu military culture demanded that they fight. To withdraw without battle would dishonor the ancestors and destroy the kingdom's legitimacy. They would attack not because victory was possible, but because honor demanded it. This decision doomed 20,000 brave warriors to face impossible odds. 8:30 a.m., Zulu forces appeared on the surrounding hills. Unlike Isandlwana, there would be no surprise attack. Both armies deployed in full view of each other across the Malabathini plain. The British square formation was massive, each side nearly half a mile long. Artillery pieces anchored the corners with interlocking fields of fire. Gatling guns covered the approaches with mechanical precision. 15,000 riflemen waited with ammunition readily available. 9 a.m. The Zulu attack began. But this wasn't the coordinated horns of the bull formation that had triumphed at Isandlwana. Facing an immobile square, the warriors could only attack frontally. Regiment after regiment charged across the open ground. The British response was devastating. Artillery shells tore gaps in the advancing formations. Gatling guns cut down entire ranks with mechanical efficiency. Martini Henry rifles fired in disciplined volleys. "It was more massacre than battle," one British officer later wrote. The Zulu warriors displayed incredible courage, advancing into certain death. But courage alone could not overcome concentrated modern firepower. Wave after wave of Zulu attacks broke against the British square. Each assault followed the same tragic pattern. Warriors would advance at the run across 800 yards of open ground. Artillery would open fire at maximum range, creating carnage in the ranks. Survivors would continue forward into rifle range. Disciplined volleys would cut down dozens at a time. A few warriors might reach within 50 yards of the British lines. None got closer. The Gatling guns were particularly devastating. These early machine guns could fire 600 rounds per minute. Against massed infantry in open terrain, they were unstoppable. The Gatlings swept the field like giant scythes, reported war correspondent Archibald Forbes. Individual acts of heroism were witnessed on both sides. British medical officers treated wounded Zulu warriors under fire. Zulu commanders led from the front, dying alongside their men. Some warriors attempted to crawl forward after being wounded multiple times. But personal bravery couldn't change the tactical reality. This was industrial warfare meeting traditional tactics. The outcome was never in doubt. 10:15 a.m. With Zulu resistance crumbling, Chelmsford ordered the cavalry forward. This was the exploitation phase. Mounted troops pursuing broken enemies. The 17th Lancers and colonial cavalry swept across the battlefield. Fleeing Zulu warriors had no answer to mounted pursuers. The psychological impact was enormous. For centuries, Zulu armies had withdrawn in good order after battles. Now they were being hunted like animals across their own territory. King Cetshwayo, watching from a distant hill, understood what this meant. His military power was being systematically destroyed, not just defeated, annihilated. The cavalry pursuit continued for miles. Scattered groups of warriors were ridden down and killed. Some attempted to make stands at river crossings or rocky outcrops. These were quickly overwhelmed by superior firepower and mobility. By noon, organized Zulu resistance had completely collapsed. The survivors fled in all directions, carrying news of the disaster throughout Zululand. With the battlefield secured, Chelmsford ordered the advance on Ulundi itself. The Zulu capital was found almost deserted. King Cetshwayo had fled with his remaining advisors. The British systematically destroyed everything of military value. Government buildings were burned to the ground. Military kraals were demolished. Weapon stores were confiscated or destroyed. Cattle herds were confiscated as spoils of war. But this wasn't random destruction. Chelmsford understood the symbolic importance of his actions. By destroying Ulundi, he was demonstrating that Zulu military power no longer existed. News of the capital's destruction reached King Cetshwayo, who had withdrawn to a safe distance, confirming that his kingdom's resistance was broken. The message was clear. Resistance was futile. The psychological impact was devastating. For generations, Ulundi had represented the heart of Zulu power. Its destruction marked the end of an era. Scattered Zulu groups began surrendering throughout July. Chiefs who had supported Cetshwayo switched sides. The military backbone of the kingdom had been shattered in a single morning. The Battle of Ulundi was utterly one-sided. British casualties: 15 killed, 78 wounded Zulu casualties. Over 1,500 confirmed dead on the battlefield. Hundreds more killed during the cavalry pursuit. Thousands wounded. Entire regiments effectively destroyed. These numbers tell the story of industrial warfare. Modern weapons, properly employed, could achieve casualty ratios previously unimaginable. The psychological trauma was even more significant than the physical losses. The Zulu military system depended on victory and honor. Ulundi represented complete, humiliating defeat. August 28, 1879. King Cetshwayo was captured. The British found him hiding in a remote forest location. His capture marked the formal end of Zulu independence. The kingdom was divided into 13 separate chieftaincies. Each would be ruled by leaders acceptable to the British. Traditional military regiments were disbanded. The age of the Zulu Empire was over. Ulundi demonstrated several crucial military principles. Defensive firepower supremacy. Prepared positions with modern weapons could create insurmountable killing zones. Combined arms effectiveness. Artillery, infantry, and cavalry, working together, multiplied combat power exponentially. Tactical adaptation. The British had learned from Isandlwana and applied those lessons perfectly. Industrial warfare reality. Traditional courage and skill couldn't overcome technological and organizational advantages. From the Zulu perspective, what went wrong? Strategic constraint. They were forced to attack on unfavorable terms to defend their capital. Tactical obsolescence. Traditional formations were suicide against concentrated modern firepower. Leadership limitations. No tactical system could overcome such massive disadvantages. Resource exhaustion. Months of warfare had depleted Zulu military resources. The contrast with Isandlwana is striking. At Isandlwana, Zulus achieved tactical surprise against dispersed enemies in favorable terrain. At Ulundi, British achieved tactical concentration against traditional enemies in open terrain. Both battles proved the same principle. Concentration of force at the decisive point determines victory. Ulundi marked more than just the end of the Anglo-Zulu War. It represented a turning point in military history. For colonial warfare, traditional societies could no longer resist industrial powers through military means alone. For British doctrine, the lessons of concentrated firepower and proper tactics were incorporated throughout the empire. For African resistance, future opposition movements would need to adapt to technological realities. For military technology, the effectiveness of early machine guns and modern artillery was definitively proven. The Zulu military system had been among the most effective in Africa. If they couldn't resist modern industrial warfare, no traditional society could. This realization spread throughout the colonial world. The age of easy European expansion was beginning, but the cost was enormous in human terms. Thousands of brave warriors died at Ulundi. An entire civilization's military tradition was destroyed. The cultural trauma lasted for generations. Modern military efficiency came at a terrible price. The Anglo-Zulu War trilogy, Isandlwana, Rorke's Drift, and Ulundi, became legendary. Each battle taught different lessons about courage, leadership, and military effectiveness. Isandlwana showed that overconfidence and poor tactics could lead to disaster, regardless of technological advantage. Rorke's Drift demonstrated that discipline and defensive positions could overcome overwhelming odds. Ulundi proved that systematic application of modern military principles was nearly unstoppable. Together, these battles marked the transition from traditional to industrial warfare. The implications extended far beyond southern Africa. Military academies worldwide studied these engagements for decades. Colonial administrators applied the lessons throughout the British Empire. African societies understood that military resistance alone was insufficient. European powers gained confidence in their technological superiority. The Zulu people, meanwhile, began the long process of adaptation to colonial rule. Some collaborated with the new system. Others maintained cultural resistance. Many simply struggled to survive in a transformed world. King Cetshwayo was eventually allowed to return from exile, but died in 1884. His kingdom was never restored to its former power. Looking back at our three-part series, we see how each battle built on the others. Isandlwana established that modern weapons weren't automatically decisive. Traditional tactics, properly executed with superior numbers and favorable terrain, could still triumph. The Zulus proved that courage and military skill remained relevant in the industrial age. Rorke's Drift showed the flip side, that modern weapons in prepared defensive positions could create nearly insurmountable advantages. The British proved that discipline and proper tactics could overcome enormous numerical disadvantages. Ulundi combined these lessons into a systematic demonstration of industrial military power. The British used everything they had learned: concentration of force, prepared positions, combined arms tactics, and overwhelming firepower to achieve total victory. Each battle was a learning experience for both sides. The side that learned faster and adapted better ultimately prevailed. This pattern would repeat throughout the colonial period. Traditional societies that could adapt survived and sometimes thrived. Those that couldn't were swept aside by the tide of industrial warfare. The lessons of Ulundi remain relevant today. Technological adaptation is crucial for military survival. Tactical flexibility often matters more than traditional methods. Combined arms coordination multiplies combat effectiveness. Intelligence and preparation can overcome numerical disadvantages. Industrial capacity ultimately determines long-term military success. These principles apply to modern conflicts, just as they did in 1879. Military forces that fail to adapt to new technologies and tactics faced the same fate as the Zulu army at Ulundi. The courage of individual warriors cannot overcome systematic disadvantages indefinitely. The Battle of Ulundi ended the Anglo-Zulu War, but it began something larger. It marked the full emergence of industrial warfare as the dominant military paradigm. Traditional military societies worldwide would face similar challenges over the following decades. Some would adapt and survive. Others would be swept away. The bravery displayed by Zulu warriors at Ulundi deserves our respect. They faced impossible odds with honor and courage. Their sacrifice marked the end of an era, but also the beginning of a new chapter in African history. The British victory was complete, but it came at a price we're still calculating today. The destruction of traditional societies created problems that persist to this day. Military efficiency isn't the only measure of civilization. If you enjoyed this trilogy of Anglo-Zulu War battles, check out our other military history series, and let us know in the comments, which of the 3 battles, Isandlwana, Rorke's Drift, or Ulundi, do you think had the greatest historical impact? Thanks for joining us on this journey through one of history's most dramatic military campaigns.